Hello everyone, Zelrint here, and today, now that we know that Dushevnaya is coming up next, I thought we'd kind of go over and look at her skills. Now, if you see, my camera's on the right bottom side of my screen now instead of the left. That's just because I've gotten some feedback that within these Excel sheets, there's a lot more text on the left that's more important, so I thought I'd just go ahead and move my camera over to the right so that maybe you can see a little bit more here. But we'll go ahead and take a look at all of her skills, and then I'll kind of give my thoughts on whether or not she's going to be a good unit for most to pull at this point, based on what we currently know of the units we've already had, as well as kind of my prediction on upcoming units. As we know now, with her, all those leaks are completely wrong, so who knows who's coming up next. As like they're saying, it's just a dartboard. I still fully expect the units, while they can come out in any order, I expect us to still get all the units that came out before Clue K first, then we'll get Clue K, and then we'll see all the units in a random order come out that came out before Springfield. So I think it's still going to be that core group of units, but it could be anybody that comes out. But I still think that should dictate your your decision making on whether or not you're going to want to pull over her. But first, let's go ahead and take a look at her skills here. And so we go down to the passive first, as that kind of controls our whole kit here. So we have a Blessed Artwork. This is a increases the damage dealt by all allies by 10%. So right here, just a generic 10% increased damage for everyone. That works for any team. And so right now, when we're still kind of getting the pieces of the puzzle for all of the different elemental teams, that right there just makes her generically good right now for anybody you can use her. But the big thing is we have had all the ice units become available. We have Makiatto, we have Lada, we have Suomi, and so right now she's going to be your core support for your ice team just because we already have all of them. We're not waiting anybody, because at this point I believe I don't think there's any ice units that we know of on the CN side that are not out. So she has her whole team already, which is great because her second portion of this is that it's increased by an additional 10% for ice damage. And then at the end of her action, she gets a contamination gauge or skill points increased by 2. Then she has kind of a similar thing to Makiatto in that if her HP is above 80%, it decreases damage dealt the stability gauge by 1 point, and then she gains Insight. And as we know, Insight increases their range by 1. Keeping her HP above 80% will be easy, because Suomi, being the core of the ice team in terms of the sustain, she gives them those shields that makes it where they're much less likely to have damage to their HP. So outright good. And while she doesn't put a shield on herself like Makiatto does, it's not that big a deal because of Suomi. And you're pretty much always going to have Suomi in the team that you use Dushevnaya, so not too big of a deal there. And then, so when we go up to her skills here, you have your standard basic attack, Daybreak, 80% damage. It has that nice extra range because she is a sniper unit. Then you have Hero's Principles. This one has two-turn cooldown, stability damage of 2. This one selects an enemy target within an 8-tile radius, so same radius there. Just remember, with Insight, it has that extra range there. It'll deal physical damage equivalent to 110% attack. If the skill kills the enemy with the Ice-type debuff, so any Ice-type debuffs, which you should have on them pretty much at all times if you're doing a full Ice team, she'll gain 1 stack of Blessing of Ice. And what Blessing of Ice is when the number of stacks of this buff reaches 4. So that's the tough part about this one. It requires it to get to 4 to trigger this extra portion. Hero's Principles is enhanced, so that skill gets enhanced. It will now ignore 15% of the damage reduction from cover, deals ice damage, and increases the damage dealt towards enemies on friendly ice-type tiles by up to 130%. This buff can be stacked up to 4 times. It is only effective once and cannot be dispelled. Realistically, she is not your core damage dealer in the ice team. Your core damage dealer is going to be Makiatto. She's there to support her, so I don't see this one getting used as much within her kit, but it is there if you are wanting to get that extra little bit of damage out of her. Then you have her other skill here, Winner's God Approval. Stability damage of 2. This one has no cooldown, but it does have a contamination gauge consumption or skill point cost of 3. Now, just remember from her passive, she does get 2 points at the end of her turn every turn. So this is ultimately only has that 1 extra that you need to acquire to be able to cast this multiple times. And this one is select a tile within a 6-tile radius, deals AoE ice damage equivalent to 50% attack to all enemies within that tool tile radius, and creates frost tiles that last for 2 turns. Enhances the skill on the next use, so the second time she uses it, and that'll increase the damage from 50 to 70%, and this time it inflicts solidification on the target for 1 turn. If the skill is enhanced, it cannot be enhanced again. And then when you look at what solidification is, decreases movement speed by 1 tile. At the end of action, if they have 2 layers of this, it is converted to chill, which lasts for 1 turn. And chill is making it where they cannot move. What's really nice about frost in general, and this is, you have Suomi that puts the frost down as well, is the ability basically to get ice weakness on the enemy, which is going to be really good for especially the units that already don't move, like bosses, like on the platoon side of things, so that you can actually do more damage from them having that extra weakness. So, and this one having a contamination gauge cost of 3, it's not too big of a deal. You'll be able to get those points. So it's not going to be that hard to cast this multiple times and get that enhanced one off. And then if she has, and if you look at the second part here, if she does have a full skill points, then she can immediately use it again, which is really nice. And then you have Book of Prophecy, which is her ultimate buff and a support. This one has a cooldown of 3 turns, but doesn't have any skill point cost, doesn't do damage. So this one applies 1 stack of Blizzard's Prayer to all allies within a 7-tile radius. And what Blizzard's Prayer is it inflicts solidification on the target before using an active attack. So now your allies that have this will put solidification on the enemies. And remember, if you can get 2 layers of that, that's going to freeze them in place. So it's going to be very easy to just stop complete movement of the enemies with her. And this will increase damage dealt by 10%, so just another 10% on top of their damage. And this can only take effect once. It's considered a buff and cannot be dispelled. So, but it is an AoE that it's putting on all your allies. So nice there. Yeah, it does that. And then let's see. Where was I on this? Oh, I'm looking at the one above it. So it got some Blizzard Prayer on them, and then again increases her contamination gauge by 2 points. So that plus her passive, so it's a very easy way in one single turn with the ultimate to get 4 by that. And then she'll gain Blizzard's Domain for 2 turns. While she has Blizzard's Domain, if her contamination gauge is at 0 points, so if she completely empties it, she will then get an additional 2 skill points. And so, very easy to accumulate them, and so you can kind of cycle. To me, it's almost like you're going to want to cycle through Winter's God's Approval, and then her ultimate. And as long as you can keep those skill points coming in, that's kind of the rotation I could see using her for at that point. And so that is her kit. And then when looking at Blizzard's Domain, so that was the other buff she gets on herself. If an ally dealt single target damage to an enemy within attack range, she will do her own support action against that enemy, dealing physical damage equivalent to 80% attack and 2 stability damage to them. This effect can be triggered up to 2 times per turn, and it can't be dispelled. So she is a support action user, just like she's kind of like a weak version of, say, like a QJ when she has this on her. So not too big of not a big damage dealer, but every little bit helps. And so let's go ahead now and take a look at her. If you go over her dupes, now one thing with her is her dupes are not necessary at all. She pretty much has everything within her kit with them. Nothing really is significant until her V6, and I would advise pretty much everybody not to just, unless you really like her and she's like your favorite character in this game, I would definitely not go for V6, especially if you're free to play, because you want to build out your teams. But let's go ahead and take a look at them if you want to know here. So we have her first one, which will upgrade her skill, Book of Prophecy, which then increases the effect range by 2 tiles, and then it'll apply a random buff and movement increase 2 for all allies within range for 2 turns. Blizzard's Prayer increases damage dealt by 20% instead. So the nice thing is you get that movement increase of 2, so it can be nice to get your team moving around a lot more. But if you're doing any content that requires heavier movement, then you're going to want to use your heavier movement teams. And you already have a lot of movement, like if you have Lada. So while it's nice, I don't see that being necessary at all. There's some units that have really a broken V1s like Vector, and this one just is not that, and I would not want to waste the pulls for that. And then we get to the V2. Attacks ignore 15% of the damage reduction from cover at the start of action. Creates frost tiles within a 1-tile radius for 2 turns. If Dushevnaya is on a friendly ice type tiles, increases damage dealt the stability gauge by 1 point. Then she's, again, just remember, she's not your damage dealer, so anything that's extra damage or in that capacity for her is not worth it. So the V2, nothing special there. V3 increases the effective range by 1 tile for Winter's Grout approval. Increases the AoE ice damage dealt to 70%. So instead of 50 on the non-enhanced, it's 70. And then with its enhanced, it's 90% attack. It's just more damage. She's not your damage dealer. Not that big a deal. The V4 increases the number of stacks of Blessing of Ice she gains by 1. And remember, she's trying to get the 4 to trigger it. So instead of getting 1, she'll get 2. So it'll take 2 times rather than 4 to get full stacks. When the number of stacks reaches 4, increases damage dealt towards enemies by 140%. If the target is on friendly ice type tiles, increases damage dealt by 160%. Just more damage for her. She's not your damage dealer. V5 dispels 1 buff from 4 random enemies within range. Increases the number of stacks of Blizzard's Prayer applied by 1. When she has Blizzard's Domain, and now she ignores 30% defense and increases her number of action support by 1 time. Again, more damage for her. She does not need that. She's your support. Now the big one, though. V6. Increases the damage dealt for all allies by 20%. So that's just another flat 20%. Really nice. And additionally increases ice damage dealt by 40%. Really big there as well. Dispels 1 defense type buff after using an active attack. So that's her supporting your allies, because she's removing the buffs off the enemies so your Makiatto can do more damage. And then if she is on friendly ice type tiles, she'll put vulnerability 2 on the target for 2 turns. And vulnerability 2 is that increases damage received by 20%. So just a flat, another 20% increased damage. Her V6 is massive in terms of giving her a lot of support. But it's her V6, and she doesn't really get anything else special for her all the way going up to her V6. So, unless you're a super whale, I would not go for her V6. She is good on her V0. Don't worry about pulling for these. And we'll kind of discuss why here in a second, because if you're going to invest in the Ice team and you want to get dupes of a unit for the Ice team, you're way better off going for Makiatto pretty much on every dupe. So if you want to whale out, I would whale out on Makiatto before I whale out Dushevnaya, just in terms of being able to amplify damage of the Ice team. Okay, and then from there, we'll go ahead and take a look at her keys. So first, for her fixed keys, the first one is, for each excess stack of Blessing of Ice, increases crit rate of Hero's Principle by 5% up to 30%. So she can get a decent amount of crit rate, which is always nice on units. But then again, she is not your damage dealer. But it is nice to get a little bit more out of her. If an active attack hits 1 target, increases damage dealt by 20%. And damage to stability gauge by 2 points. So the nice thing is, I like stability gauge damage from her, because you do want to break enemies quicker. So that's always good there. And then just a little bit of extra damage for her. Fixed key 3 is, when an active skill creates ice type tiles in an area that has ice type and already has ice type tiles, triggers tile reaction and removes the effect of the tile and dispels 1 buff from the enemy. For each tile removed, she gains 1 stack of Blessing of Ice, up to 3 stacks. So this is a really nice key for getting those Blessing of Ice stacks, because as you know, looking at Hero's Principles, it's really slow to get all the way up to those 4 stacks unless you're getting her dupes. And so this is going to be, to me, a really good key to have on her so that you can get those stacks. She's not your main damage dealer, but it is going to at least make her a little bit more competent in that capacity. You have a fixed key 4, Winter's God's Approval. If the skill causes the enemy to enter stability break, inflicts defense decrease 2 for 2 turns. I think this one is going to be really nice on her as well. If you look at defense decrease 2, does it actually show what it is here? It does not, but it's basically a defense reduction on the enemy. So it's just more damage. It's going to be more damage. It's similar to vulnerability, but instead it's reducing their defense. But you can just view it as a way of increasing the amount of damage you can do. And that's going to be good for your main damage dealer, Makiatto. The one negative of this is it requires her to be the one that do the stability break. So you kind of have to work around that. But then again, this isn't like sort of Convallaria where there's a speed capacity where you have to use the units in a specific order. You can use you can easily time it so that hers is the one doing the stability break. So I find this to be a great key for her to have to get that debuff. And then you can have Makiatto come in and do some massive damage with that extra buff there. Fixed key 5. If she has Blizzard's Domain, she's immune to movement displacement effects. Really nice. It's situational, but it's nice that she has that capacity. And if at the start of turn she's on friendly ice tiles, dispels 2 debuffs from self. A nice way, situational, but a nice way to keep debuffs off herself. You're going to have easy ways to get ice on the ground, Suomi, her. So that one's going to be easy to trigger there as well. Her affinity key, if you get her up, just an attack HP crit percent. Nothing special on that one. But her common key, attack plus 5%, increases elemental damage dealt by 10% towards enemies who are unable to move, or whose movement speed is smaller or equal to self. That's going to be good on your ice damage dealers. This one, it's kind of tricky to me, because to me, with I think to put it on Makiatto for her to be able to do that extra damage, and I believe she wants attack percent over crit, because she already has that innate crit within her kit here. And so one thing is, when you max it out, while this is her key, I would absolutely put this one on Makiatto over putting it on Dushevnaya, because Dushevnaya is not your damage dealer. I want that extra damage on my Makiatto. So it's a nice common key right there. And then what they just got, I believe like 2 patches ago on the Sea side, is her expansion key. And one of the big things with her, and we won't have this expansion key when she comes out, so when I discuss on whether or not to pulver her, I'm not going to take this into consideration. Just know this is what she will be getting in the future when she has a rerun down the line. But when allies deal ice damage, she gains 1 stacking of Blessing of Ice. Right there, that's going to make it in the ice team very easy to trigger Blessing of Ice for her. So that makes her do more damage. And then increases ice damage dealt by all allies by 5%, up to 15%. If you have a full ice team, that is just making a flat 15%, very easy to get. So more damage for your entire ice team. Now her single target attacks deal ice damage rather than physical. Great. Now she's doing the ice damage, which you're easily going to be able to put ice weakness on enemies in this team. Ignores 30% of the enemy's defense, and it increases ice damage dealt to enemies by 30%. So basically, she is now getting to the point where she's doing a reasonable damage. And there's a big reason they really needed to give her this buff, which we'll see here in a second. And then at the start of the battle, increases damage by 10% and increases ice damage by 10% for the 2 highest attack allies excluding self. And like I said, if you're putting your attack buffs, like her common key, Makiatto's common key on herself, Makiatto's getting that buff, and she's the big one you want to get that buff. And so that is going to be nice right there for her. And so, now, whether she's worth it to pull or not, there is one big thing. When you look at her pros and her cons at the top here, you have the main pros. Premium support for ice teams. She's your ice support. Whether she's the best support in the game or not, it does not matter. She is the best support for the ice team. So if you are going heavy into the ice team, you want her for sure. Then she has the constant skill point gain from her passive. No RNG or activation requires. So she's going to have the skill points constantly coming in to use her skill that requires it. And she can deal some damage with her second usage of her second skill, and she has action support. And I believe there used to be a it's on the cons here. Her support buffs are good for ice teams, but she's not groundbreaking, which is true. She's not like some of the other supports in the games, like Vector for Burn, Mechd for Corrosion. Who's the other ones? What are the other ones here? Can't even remember all of them. Cinerisi for Burn, Lena for Electric. I think she's one of the weaker supports in terms of what she puts to her team without her expansion key. The key things without her expansion key. But yeah, like I said, it's not groundbreaking. And then they recommend, and this would be kind of the same thing for me, you go over Makiattos V1 before you get her. And the big reason for that is that if you didn't pull Makiattos V1, we probably will be seeing Makiatto rerun here, not this patch, but the one after, because on CN they rerun units 3 patches after they've got released. So I suspect Makiatto rerun will be coming soon. And the reason they say if you only have Makiatto's V0, her V1 is better than getting Dushevnaya is because her V1 makes her cold precision shot do significantly more damage. So much more damage that all of Dushevnaya's buffs to ice will not benefit Makiatto more than her V1. So if you don't have Makiatto's V1 on a meta level, it's better to get Makiatto V1 before you think about pulling for her. From my perspective, though, even if I have Makiatto's V1, but even if I was free to play and I had Makiatto's V0, I would still get Dushevnaya before I got Makiatto's V1, simply because I want to build out my roster. This is a waifu game, like I said many times. I want more units in this game. It's just that pure and simple. You want more units, even if it's not meta. I would pull Dushevnaya before I pulled V1 Makiatto. But that's just my opinion. From a meta perspective, it is better to just save for Makiatto's V1. And then when it says here, action sport, her action sport does not do that much damage, which is true. So overall, great unit. She is going to be, for a lot of people, they'll say an easy skip because what she provides to the ice team is not as impressive as, say, Vector provides for the burn team. I would say I put Cinerisi over her in terms of, well, we just want to get a second sustain to get that more comfiness. I like Lena. I put Lena above her in terms of value because I like Lena's common key. And then from what it sounds like when they're adding more difficult content, hopefully, or potentially, CCing enemies could potentially be important in the future. So I'd put her. But one big thing is we have got Makiatto, we got Suomi, we have the full ice team. And so we can straight up, if you get her now, you can complete an entire team. You have the whole synergetic ice team. You can have a core team for like the platoon battles and all that. So that is one great thing with her, is you can just kind of have your first ice team. So if you're investing heavily, go ahead, definitely get her in that capacity as well. And that is pretty much it. We didn't look at her weapon here, Ballad's Whisper. This is, if you have Makiatto and you did not pull Makiatto's weapon, I would pull Makiatto's weapon before I would pull hers. One reason being that if you pull hers, like we'll look at the stats here, if the user countered enemy's weakness, ignores 10% of the enemy's defense. If it countered ice weakness, additionally ignores 10% defense. The reason I say if you pull hers before Makiatto's and you have a Makiatto, you would actually want to put Ballad's Whisper on Makiatto versus her, because it's also good for Makiatto, but Bitter Candy is better for Makiatto than Ballad's Whisper, so it's almost like a waste to pull her sniper unless you've already got Bitter Candy, just because of who's going to do more damage. But then it has within her stats here, when the user has insight, increases damage dealt by 10%, up to 20% for multiple dupes. And then before allies use an active attack, if the target has ice-type debuffs, increases ice damage dealt by 5%, up to 10%. If they have chill, increases ice damage dealt by 10%, up to 20%. And then her imprint, if it's her, increases damage to Molly thermal power by 2.5%. If they have solidification, increases by 2.5%. And so nothing crazy on her weapon. It's just like Bitter Candy, except it's more targeted for her. But I find if you're going to pull for one of the two ice snipers, Bitter Candy is the better one to get, just because Makiatto is the core damage dealer, and it's going to outright make you do more damage if you're going to go for a weapon in general. You don't need either of them. Samosek is good enough if you have that, just because you want to get those extra stats on her, that extra attack percent. If you don't have that, you can also get... I guess it doesn't show it on here. The Battle Pass one, I think, would be fine on her as well. I would take the Battle Pass one before I took the free-to-play option, but it looks like they're saying the free-to-play options are better here. But I don't know about that. I'd rather have that extra damage percent that the Battle Pass sniper gives. But overall, anything will work on her. She's a support unit. Support units aren't worried about that extra damage as much, so her weapon isn't as big of a deal as, say, getting Makiattos. But overall, a great character. Like I said, the meta is going to say get that V0 for Makiatto, or get the V1 for Makiatto before you pull her. But I like having more units in this game. I'm pulling for her. I will not be pulling for dupes for her, but I will be pulling for her because I'm pulling for every unit in this game. And yeah, that's just my thoughts on it. Let me know in the comments what your plans are. Are you planning to pull for her, or are you waiting for someone else? Like I said, I will have a priority list coming up. I'll probably do one this weekend just to kind of say where I put her in terms of where I think her value is compared to all the other units that I believe will be coming out after her within the near future. But who knows what's going to happen now? They could be just throwing in a dartboard. We could see Belka or Andrus or one of them come out next. Who knows? We'll just kind of have to see. But yeah, that's pretty much it. If you like my content, if you could like, comment, and subscribe, it really helps. And thanks for watching.